You won't believe what happened next. A woman with no degree, no title, just a public library worker, was faced with an impossible challenge. The CEO of a $1 billion company tossed a wrench at her feet, sneering, "You have 30 minutes to fix this engine, or you're out. Don't think you can do what my top engineers couldn't." But what happened after that will blow your mind. If you think you've seen it all, think again. This isn't just a story about a woman proving herself. It's about shattering every expectation and turning arrogance into dust. Hit that like button, subscribe, and keep watching, because you're about to witness the most jaw-dropping comeback ever. Lena Vu's life was nothing like the high-powered engineers she was about to face. She wasn't born into wealth or privilege, and she certainly didn't have a degree hanging on her wall. Her mornings began in a small, cramped apartment in a working-class neighborhood where the sound of traffic drowned out any hope of peace. By day, she worked as a librarian, shelving books and helping kids with their homework. A job she loved, but it wasn't enough. What Lena did have, however, was an uncanny talent for understanding machines. Her hands, worn from years of tinkering with broken-down cars in her garage, had a kind of magic to them, but no one knew that. No one but her. So, when she received the invitation to tech-solve the tech giant for a simple test, she knew it wasn't a chance to prove her worth. It was a setup. A way for the CEO, Richard Sterling, to humiliate her in front of his entire team. They didn't believe in her, not because she wasn't skilled, but because she didn't fit the mold. No Ivy League degree, no prestigious background, just raw, unrecognized talent. And yet, here she was standing in front of Sterling's multi-million-dollar engine with every eye in the room fixed on her. They thought she was just some dreamer. A failure in the making. But inside, Lena was about to show them exactly what a failure looked like. As the clock ticked down, the room grew more tense. Richard Sterling, the CEO, paced like a lion, waiting to pounce, his eyes never leaving Lena. 30 minutes, remember? He called out, a sneer in his voice. The crowd laughed, murmuring, sharing knowing glances. They all knew she couldn't do it. They were sure of it. Lena Tha was already lost in the engine before her. She bent down, fingers brushing over the cold metal, tracing the grooves with precision that made the audience fall silent for the first time. They had underestimated her. They had no idea what she could do. But as she began to analyze, something in her chest tightened. This wasn't just any engine. This was a direct copy of the propulsion system she designed years ago for NASA's Orion mission. She froze. This was my design, my work, stolen. Every part of the engine had been altered, corrupted, butchered in ways that only someone who didn't understand the fundamentals could manage. The resonance frequency was all wrong. The compression ratio was off. She knew the stakes. If this engine ever flew with these modifications, it would be a disaster. A ticking time bomb in the sky. Her right hand, still scarred from the explosion years ago, shook slightly as she reached for the tools. But she didn't hesitate. This wasn't just a test anymore. Sterling had made a mistake. He didn't just bring her here to prove she was useless. He gave her a chance to expose the truth. Not just about the engine, but about the company, about the man who had sold her life's work to the highest bidder. The mockery from the engineers only fueled her determination. She could hear their whispers, their insults, their disbelief. She's shaking. What does she think she's doing? But Lena didn't hear them. She tuned everything out, focusing only on the engine. Every movement was calculated. Every turn of the wrench deliberate. Sterling stood behind her, his smirk widening as he saw her hands tremble. He thinks he's won, she thought, but she was just getting started. She called out, her voice steady, cutting through the mocking laughter. "This engine will explode in the air. You'll kill people." The room went silent again, but this time it wasn't out of disbelief. It was fear. They weren't laughing now. Her fingers worked furiously, fine-tuning the calibration system. She could feel the eyes on her, but she didn't flinch. The pressure was mounting, but she had no choice now. She had to finish it. She had to prove them all wrong. As the final moments ticked away, Lena stepped back, breathing hard. Sterling was already looking smug, sure she'd fail. But when the diagnostic screen lit up green, perfectly green, the reality hit like a freight train. The engine was fixed. It was working better than it had before. Sterling's face fell. His eyes, once full of arrogance, now widened in disbelief. The crowd's shock was palpable. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to process what had just happened. But Lena wasn't done. She stood tall, ignoring the stunned silence, and delivered the final blow. "This design," she said, pointing to the engine, "was mine. And your company has been using it illegally. It's time to pay for that." The room erupted into chaos. Some looked at Sterling, others at Lena, unsure how to react. But one thing was clear. The woman they had written off, the woman they had humiliated, had just exposed a truth that would bring their empire crashing down. As the engine roared to life, the crowd was in shock, but the tension in Lena's chest was only beginning to rise. She had proven them wrong in a way no one expected, but this wasn't about the engine anymore. It was about taking down the man who had stolen everything from her, who had destroyed her life for corporate gain. Lena knew what she had to do. She had spent years running from the truth, hiding behind a quiet life. But now, standing in the heart of TechSolve, she couldn't hide any longer. Richard Sterling didn't just challenge her to fix an engine. He challenged her to reclaim her dignity. She took a deep breath, her hand shaking as she reached into her bag and pulled out something she hadn't touched in years, a small, worn NASA pin. The symbol of everything she had lost, the reminder of a time when she was the youngest chief engineer in the history of the Orion spacecraft program. But that was before Daniel Walsh. The man she had trusted, the man she had loved, betrayed her. The man who had stolen her work and sold it to Lockheed. The man who had nearly destroyed her career with lies. And Sterling. He was the one who had bought her stolen work and now stood in front of her smug and arrogant, pretending to be the hero. It was time to expose the whole truth. Not just the engine, not just the patent infringement, but everything. Lena straightened her back, facing Sterling with a calmness that felt like ice running through her veins. "You think this is over?" she said, her voice low and deliberate. "You're about to lose everything?" Sterling's smirk faltered. He could feel the shift in the room. The crowd, once eager for her failure, now looked to him with uncertainty. The truth was sinking in, piece by piece. And Lena was ready to bring it all crashing down. "This engine," she continued, "wasn't just stolen from me. It's your company's entire future. And I've got the proof." She pulled out her phone and swiped through the screen, bringing up the classified NASA blueprints she'd secretly kept. She had everything. Emails, designed security footage that exposed the conspiracy between Sterling and Lockheed. "You sold out everything I built," Lena said, her voice rising with the weight of every painful memory. "And you're going to pay for it." Sterling's eyes narrowed. He was cornered now, his mask slipping, revealing the panic he had kept hidden. He wasn't the untouchable CEO anymore. He was a man facing a downfall that was about to be broadcast to the world. Lena's mind raced, but her movements were sharp, precise. "I'm not just exposing you," she said. "I'm making sure no one ever gets away with this again." She clicked send on her phone, and the evidence was sent to the media, to the authorities, to everyone who needed to know the truth. In one move, she had dismantled a corporation's empire of lies. But that wasn't the final act. No, this was about something deeper. It was about proving to herself that she was more than the person they tried to make her. She wasn't just some library worker. She wasn't just the woman who'd been pushed aside. She was the one who had the strength to rise above, to take control of her own destiny, and to expose the truth no matter the cost. The clock was ticking. Sterling's empire was crumbling, and Lena's quiet revenge had just begun. Lena stood motionless as her phone buzzed with the confirmation that her evidence was out. The files, the documents, the proof that would bring TechSolve to its knees were now in the hands of the press, the authorities, and anyone who could expose Richard Sterling for the fraud he was. But that wasn't enough. No, it was time to finish what she'd started. She turned toward Sterling, his face pale, a mix of fury and fear that he couldn't hide. The once confident, cocky CEO was now a man on the verge of collapse. His empire was crumbling right before his eyes, and Lena could feel the weight of that victory slowly sinking in. She had him, and he knew it. But she wasn't just here for the destruction of a man. She was here for justice. For everything he took from her. Her career, her reputation, and her dreams. "You think this is a game?" Sterling. Lena's voice rang out sharp and cutting through the stunned silence. "This isn't just about you or your company. This is about all the people you've destroyed along the way. The lives you've crushed because of your arrogance." Sterling tried to regain control, his voice shaking. "You'll never get away with this. You think you can just..." He stopped as he saw her pull out a printed copy of the cease and desist order, the one from her lawyer. The one that threatened a lawsuit that could cost TechSolve $500 million. "You're going to pay for this?" Lena said, her voice calm but deadly. "And it's not just the lawsuit. No. This is about exposing every lie, every shady deal you've made, and watching as it all falls apart. This is what happens when you think you can just steal from someone without consequences." Sterling took a step forward, desperate now. He reached for his phone, but Lena was already one step ahead. She tapped her screen, and the screen behind her flickered to life. The room gasped as the confidential files began to scroll. The emails, the documents, the very blueprint of her Orion design, and the proof that Sterling had bought it from Lockheed for a fraction of its worth with full knowledge that it had been stolen from her. The once silent crowd was now murmuring, some looking at each other in disbelief, others glancing nervously at Sterling. The weight of what she had done was sinking in. She had broken him, but this wasn't over yet. Lena stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. "I didn't come here to gloat, Sterling. I didn't come here for your money or your apology. I came to make sure no one like you ever gets away with this again. No one gets to steal someone's future and walk away scot-free." Sterling's face was now a mask of desperation. He tried to speak, to argue, but every word he uttered only dug the hole deeper. The room was no longer on his side, and as the evidence continued to roll across the screen, Lena could see the shift in the eyes of the people around her. The engineers, the executives, even the journalists. They were starting to see her for what she was. Not a fraud. Not a mistake. But a woman who had been wronged and had finally come to claim what was hers. She looked at him one last time, her expression cold, unyielding. "You took my work. You took my reputation. But today, I'm taking back everything you stole from me. Today, I'm taking your company down, and there's nothing you can do about it." With one final tap, the email was sent. The cease and desist was official. The lawsuit was in motion. And as the first notification popped up on the screens around her, confirming the media had picked up the story, Lena couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief. The battle had been won, but there was more. She had the press conference to attend, the calls to answer, the story to tell. As the room erupted into chaos, Lena turned and walked toward the exit. Her work here was done. Richard Sterling's empire was no more. His name would be dragged through the mud, his actions exposed for all to see. But Lena, she would move on. She would leave this all behind, knowing that she had done more than just fight for her future. She had shown the world that sometimes the greatest power lies in doing the right thing, even when no one believes in you. The chaos in the room was deafening. People were shouting, pointing, trying to process what had just happened. Some of the engineers were looking at each other, mouths agape, realizing how blind they'd been. The truth had come crashing down on them, and there was no escaping it now. Richard Sterling stood frozen at the front, his face pale, his jaw clenched tight. He was a man who had built an empire on deception, but now, in front of everyone, his empire was crumbling. He tried to regain control, his hand trembling, as he reached for his phone, but no one was paying attention to him anymore. All eyes were on Lena, the woman they'd laughed at, the woman they thought was nothing. But she wasn't just standing there for applause. She wasn't interested in their approval. No, what she'd done had already been done. The damage was done, and now all she had to do was walk away. Sterling's voice finally broke through the noise, desperate cracking. "This isn't over," he spat, but even his words felt hollow. The room had turned against him, and they all knew it. Lena turned back, her expression hard. "It is over, Richard. You just didn't see it coming." Her words were like a final nail in his coffin. She had dismantled everything he stood for, and it had been effortless. His arrogance had been his undoing. As she walked toward the door, the murmurs of disbelief grew louder. Some of the engineers were apologizing, their voices barely audible, as they realized the gravity of what she had accomplished. But Lena didn't need their apologies. What she needed was this moment of clarity. The moment she had taken back everything that had been stolen from her. The press was already in motion, calling her name, following her out the door. The story was already spreading, and there was nothing Sterling could do to stop it. The media frenzy had begun, and Lena was at the center of it all, not as the villain they had hoped, but as the hero they never expected. As she stepped into the cool air outside, the weight of it all hit her. The relief, the finality of it. She hadn't just won a legal battle or a corporate war. She had taken back her life. The life she had once lost. The life that had been stolen from her by betrayal, by lies, and by a system that valued the wrong things. She paused for a moment, looking back at the building. Sterling's name would be tarnished forever. His reputation was gone. And what had been left behind? A broken man clinging to his power while the world watched as it slipped through his fingers. Lena took a deep breath, then smiled softly to herself. She had done it. She had proved them all wrong. And now she was free. Free to move forward. Free to rebuild. Free to show the world that talent wasn't defined by a degree, and worth wasn't measured by titles. Her true value had always been in her hands, in her heart, in the work she did, not in the approval of those who thought they knew better. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Lena didn't care. The future was hers to shape, and no one could take that from her. She walked away, her head held high, knowing that the only thing that mattered now was the truth, and she had just made it impossible for anyone to deny it. What Lena's story shows us is that the world doesn't always see us for who we truly are. It doesn't care about what we've sacrificed, what we've lost, or the talent we've honed in silence. People will judge you for what's on paper, for the degrees hanging on walls, for the pedigree you don't have. But here's the truth. Worth isn't determined by what others think of you. It's determined by what you believe about yourself. In every corner of the business world, in every field, there are people like Lena. Those who are underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed simply because they don't fit a mold. But Lena proved one undeniable fact. Raw talent doesn't need validation. The world may try to box you in, but it's your drive, your determination, and your ability to rise above that defines you. Think about it. How many of us have been told we're not enough? How many times have we been passed over for promotions, opportunities, or respect simply because we didn't have the right background? Lena's journey is a reminder that we are never defined by our failures, our past, or the labels people put on us. We are defined by how we choose to stand up to fight and to prove that we belong no matter what anyone else thinks. And let's talk about Sterling. He had everything: power, money, connections, but in the end he lost it all because he never understood the true value of people. He thought credentials and degrees were everything. He thought he could silence Lena with mockery and pride. But the truth? True power doesn't lie in titles. It lies in integrity. The moment Lena showed up with nothing but her talent, her knowledge, and the courage to speak the truth, she flipped the entire narrative. Lena didn't just seek revenge. She sought justice. And she did it with grace, precision, and intelligence. She didn't scream, didn't demand attention. She exposed the truth for what it was and let the world do the rest. The moment she showed those blueprints, sent the emails, and put the evidence out there, everything changed. She didn't need to destroy anyone to win. She just needed to reveal the truth. The biggest lesson here: don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. Don't let anyone tell you your worth is defined by their standards. Your value is intrinsic. It's built on what you know, what you can do, and your resilience in the face of adversity. And for the Richard Sterlings of the world, the arrogant few who believe their status defines them, remember, this arrogance is not power. Humility is. The truth always wins. Lena's victory wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a statement to the world. A reminder that integrity, talent, and perseverance will always outshine the false sense of superiority that others try to impose on us. You've just witnessed what happens when the truth comes crashing down. A woman underestimated and dismissed stepped into a room full of power, full of arrogance, and walked out with everything she deserved. Lena's story is a reminder that the world can't define you, only you can define yourself. So here's the question. Are you going to let others tell you what you're worth, or are you going to rise like Lena and show them who you really are? If you believe in the power of standing your ground, of proving the world wrong, hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe, because we need more people like Lena, and together we can rewrite the rules. Let's keep this conversation going. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Leave a comment below, and let's talk about it. Because the truth is unstoppable, and it's about time we all started living it.